trading, knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge in what you're doing can be costly, very costly. So you need a solid foundation of quality market education. Whether you're new to trading or a seasoned veteran looking to add advanced strategies to your arsenal, there's always something to learn and something to improve on. And now you can access the same knowledge that professional traders receive with Market Rebellion's Trading Education. I'm Bill Johnson, Head of Options Education here at Market Rebellion, and we've assembled a comprehensive curriculum based on decades of real trading experience, covering everything you need to know about trading options from beginner to advanced. We go way beyond the nuts and bolts of options theory to teach you how to apply specific trading strategies and the techniques needed to adapt your trades when markets shift. Regardless of your goals, you'll gain access to the education you need with easy-to-consume lessons so you can learn to trade with confidence, enhance your knowledge, and master the practical skills required for market success. So please join us for in-depth trading education only from Market Rebellion. Hey, good afternoon to all of our market rebels. It's time for another edition of Coach's Corner. And Stu,
hey,
I'm exhausted after watching that between yesterday and today.
Oh, this market's really swinging around, isn't it?
Crazy stuff. But it's the reason that we trade options, because options thrive in volatility. They can be used for speculation, but they can also be used to hedge risk. And so today, what we always try to do is on Coach's Corner is to show people some of the finer points about options, trading, strategies, volatility, all kinds of topics that you're not going to hear in other places. But a question that we get a lot, and I know you and Scotty get it a lot with margin requirements, and especially with naked options. So there's a lot of myths about how these margin calculations are done, and why sometimes it might be, hey, I did a smaller position, I got hit with a really big requirement, and I did what I thought was a really big one, only got a small requirement. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason that they seem so flaky, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Is it the market makers, Bill?
You can always blame the market makers, Stu. That seems to be a general fallback answer for everybody. But this is going to be back to basics, just basic ideas of margin requirements. Now, for this presentation, we're going to just focus on naked puts. I think it's probably safe to say if people are trading naked options, which we really don't advise, except for people who really know what they're doing, it's going to be the naked puts and not the naked calls. But the calculations we're going to show you are very similar for naked calls. We're just trying to show you kind of the ins and outs and why they seem to be all over the board. So here's your Chalk Talk question for today, everyone. So if you're new to Coach's Corner, we like to open up with a little thought-provoking question. So we've got the stock at 105. You sold one $100 naked put for $5. And the question is, what's the margin requirement? So think about that for a moment. Do you have any idea where these numbers come from or how they'd be calculated? Now, remember, in the real world, you're not going to have to do this. Your broker's platform is going to show you at the readback screen, here's your margin requirement. Here's how much your margin cash is going to be reduced for placing this trade. But a lot of times traders still say, well, where are these numbers coming from? And that's what we want to address for today. So let's start off, Stu. Why do they have margin requirements? Well, it should be fairly obvious, but let's say that you have somebody who is long, let's say a Microsoft put, it's a 400 put, and this person exercises it, and it's going to get paired up with somebody who's short that put. And so this person is going to, let's say, exercise, he's going to deliver 100 shares, happens automatically. This person in the business, we say, gets assigned. We don't say you got exercised, even though people say it. The proper term is you got assigned, and that person's going to deliver $40,000, right? That's the 400 strike times 100 shares per contract. But the question is, how do we know that if this guy has a naked short put, that he's good for it? How do we know if this guy goes to exercise that this guy's account didn't completely blow out because he was
Didn't
just
they
writing
run
all these naked options?
didn't they run a credit check before they let him do that?
Right, exactly. This is kind of the industry's version of a credit check. They're going to make sure that you have sufficient, or at least, and I put sufficient in quotes because it's not totally guaranteed unless it's a cash secured put, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's going to handle by vast majority of the times where if the stock moves against you, it gives them time to put up a margin call and say, hey, you owe more money. But what we're trying to figure out is how do they even come up with these numbers? So that's what we're going to take a look at here today. Before we do, please be sure to check out marketrebellion.com/get started. A tremendous amount of articles, videos, little training classes, all for free. So you want to make sure you get a real good starting point, a good solid foundation before you start trading options. Or maybe if you already are, might find out some things that you thought were true that actually aren't. So you want to go in there and
Here's one thing to keep in mind as Bill goes through this, as we go through this. There are minimum requirements set forth by FINRA. Every brokerage is permitted to change them, not to your benefit, to make them more stricter. They may, I guess the point is that things may vary between brokers.
It is absolutely true. Yep. That's pretty much true for all regulations. A broker can make things stricter. They can't relax them.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. So as we go through here, and I think I have a slide that touches on it, but it's to show that, if you get a little different answer from what we're showing you here, the methodology will be very, very similar. So let's also, while we're on the subject, let's talk about this idea of exercising and getting assigned, because a lot of traders think that you get paired with another trader. And they say, well, if I buy a call and I get paired up with Stu, who happens to be short that call, and I exercise it, how do I know that he's good for it? Well, that's a very good question. And if the market really worked that way, it would be a very fickle market for sure. It raised the risk levels tremendously. So the first thing to understand is that that's not the way that it works. Ultimately, you do get paired with somebody, but when you place that trade, you're not paired with somebody on the other side. Here's the way that it works. We have this clearing corporation called the Options Clearing Corporation, or OCC. And it is a highly capitalized, highly regulated clearing firm. So when they were creating this options market, they knew that that was a potential problem, that somebody on the other side wasn't going to be good for the exercise or the assignment. So the OCC, it turns out, acts as the buyer to every seller and the seller to every buyer. So it turns out that when you buy an option, not really buying it from another trader, you're buying it from the OCC. If you sell an option, you are not selling it to another trader, you are selling it to the OCC, at least in the beginning. And what's interesting about this, about having this middleman, since 1973, when options started trading, and I love this stat, Stu, not a single default has occurred from exercising options. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And part of the reason for this is because of these margin requirements. So it's to make the market just have be less risky for those who are selling options.
And keep in mind that the OCC is largely funded by the brokerage houses.
Yes.
Right. The brokerage houses actually are members of the OCC. It is in their best interest to make sure, this is going to sound really dumb, it is in the brokerage house's best interest to make sure that you do not default.
Oh, yeah.
Because they get stuck holding the bag.
Yep.
So they created this methodology that they call margin, whereas they tell you, you can do this trade, but you have to put up X amount of money. And this is what we're talking about.
This is it. So if you've ever wondered what an exercise, the little process that happens, here's how it occurs. So again, you're not initially paired up. Like when I said I buy the call and Stu sells the call, we're not really paired up in the beginning. Even though people usually talk that way, it's just to make the concepts easier. Here's what happens. Let's say that you exercise an ABC May $100 call. Your broker basically sends that message to the OCC. This is our OCC, hypothetically speaking, right here, Stu. And so they are going to take $100 cash, or actually $10,000, because again, each contract is 100 shares. So what the OCC does now, in turn, they say, okay, we got this notification. We're going to notify by random assignment. I believe they can also do first in, first out, but most of them are by a random assignment. They're going to find out a list of brokers who have traders who are short that option. And so they're going to say, all right, we've got all these brokers. It's going to be a very big list. And they might say, we've got E-Trade, Schwab, Fidelity, Merrill, and by luck of the draw, they pick E-Trade. So they notify E-Trade. E-Trade, in turn, also does a similar thing. They have a kind of a little computer program there. Think of it like a roulette wheel, and it just randomly selects some trader. So they're going to assign, let's call him Trader Joe. So Trader Joe wakes up the next day, he's got the $100 cash per share, or $10,000, but he also notices that he's missing 100 shares, and that comes back over to the person that exercised it. But again, the question is, how do we know that he's good for it? So that's the real idea behind having margin. Now, there's really a couple of camps. We're going to just talk about this briefly up front. We have what are called cash secured puts. And a cash secured put, you have to post the maximum loss. So if you sell a $100 put for 3, the most, if the stock goes to 0, would be $10,000 minus the $300 that you collected would be $9,700. And this is typically what they require in an IRA. They're going to just make you post the whole amount. There's a problem with this, though, Stu. One of the things that we like to do in a market to keep it as efficient as we can, if this call option, let's say, is trading for $10 and you think it's grossly overvalued, what are you going to want to do to it?
Sell it.
You're going to want to sell it. But what if they made you post outrageous amounts of margin to sell it?
Oh, I may not be able to sell it.
You may not be able to sell it. And so what happens is that people say, well, we end up maybe having this bias where prices are actually too high. We have to have a mechanism that allows traders to sell these options without making them overly burdensome, but at the same time not exposing the market to a ton of risk. So that's what we're going to look at here. So for long positions, technically speaking, have a margin requirement. A little bit of a shocker there for a lot of people. So if you have long calls, long puts, long spreads, straddles, it's just called a 100% margin requirement. And that just means you have to pay for the position in full. All right. So if you have a straddle that's trading for 10 or $1,000, you got to pay for it. And that's why sometimes new traders say, oh, there's not a margin requirement. Well, technically there is. It's just 100%. They make you pay for that in full. Short positions aren't so easy, right? The long positions are easy. We can calculate it. We know what 100% is. But the short positions aren't so easy. So if you have short calls, put short straddles, have potentially large losses. In the case of short calls, or one side of the short straddle, potentially unlimited losses, right? There's no theoretical limit on how high a stock's price can go. So again, it's not practical to require 100% margin. How much would we have to margin you to if you wanted to short a Microsoft call, naked call?
I don't know.
You'd have to say millions, tens of hundreds, because theoretically it could be anything. Well, now who wants to sell it?
Where can, the real question is like, where can the stock go? And who knows, right? You don't know. Maybe it's going to be 400, 500, maybe who knows where it's going to go, right? We have no idea where it's going to go. So holder of the risk, the ultimate holder of the risk, not the person who sells it, but the brokerage. How are they going to say, well, yeah, you can, hey, Trader Joe, you can go ahead and do it. But look, just in case, we need to cover our, what, so you have to put up X amount of money.
Yeah. So the point is
100%, right? Suppose the option's $5. What are you going to put up $500? I mean, that's not going to cover anything if something really bad happens.
Or if you said 100% of the potential loss. Because now you're saying, well, what is the potential loss?
That's exactly right. What is the potential loss?
So you're going, okay, well, what would be the sensible margin requirement? Well, 10 million. You're going, well, yeah, that's probably going to cover every single scenario, but now nobody's going to do it. So that's what makes the calls tricky. Puts aren't much easier because it's rare for a stock to go to 0. So the naked puts fall into two basic categories. There's what's called a cash secured. That's what we just looked at, where you have to post the full exercise price and usually less the premium that you brought in. But then there's what we call a margin transaction. And this is what we're talking about for the rest of this presentation, is about a true naked put position. Remember, calls are going to be very similar, little tweak to one of the calculations, but we're just going to focus on naked puts.
And just to be clear, there's a little funny verbiage going on with the word naked here. So what we're talking about is naked without posting the cash security, the underlying strike price, right? So when we're not doing that, it becomes really a true naked option. And now it's, okay, Joe, how much money are you going to put up in order to sell this thing? We know it's not going to be 100% or the stock price or the strike price, I should say, but it's going to be something else. And now we're going to tell you what it is.
Yep. So the thing is that we have these margin transactions. And so here's the way that it works. And this is why they can seem so fluky. There are three basic calculations that FINRA, OCC put these brokers through. And the first calculation is that you have to post 100% of the option proceeds. So if you sell that option for 5, you got to post 5. Kind of weird, isn't it? Everybody says, oh, I want to get paid. I'm going to sell this option and get paid. Well, you have to post exactly the amount that you received. Okay, so you got to post 100% of the option proceeds plus 20% of the underlying market value. All right, so in the case of that Microsoft example that's trading at $40, that's what? $80 times 100 shares per contract. And then they give you a little bit of a credit if it's out of the money. So if it's, let's say, 5 points out of the money, they'll subtract $500. If it's 10 points out of the money, they'll make it subtract off $1,000 because it has a smaller chance of going in the money. So that's one calculation. So again, the broker's platform is doing this behind the scenes, done very quickly, but they're going to come up with this calculation. They're going to hold that in the back pocket, and then we're going to go check out calculation number 2. Calculation number 2 says we're going to also require 100% of the option proceeds plus 10% of the strike price times 100 shares times the number of contracts. So now we're looking at the strike price, but again, notice you have to post 100% of the option proceeds. So we're going to do that calculation behind the scenes. They're going to store it, and then they're going to go to calculation 3. Calculation 3, no shocker here, also 100% of the option proceeds plus $2.50 per contract. That
Bill, I have a question.
Sure.
So when I sell an option, that's a credit to me, right?
Yes, but there's also an offsetting liability.
Well, let's forget about that for a second. So when I sell an option, I'm getting money in.
Correct.
But you're telling me, I love this. You're telling
you got to pay for it. You got to pay. Yeah, exactly. You got to post it.
I got to post the money.
Right.
So folks, is it really a credit?
Right. That's like, hey, Stu, can I borrow $10? Stu says yes. He says, but you got to give me $10 in order to do it.
Yeah.
So you're going, okay, well, that's not really borrowing. All right. So yes, they are forcing you or requiring you in all three calculations to post 100% of the option proceeds.
Right. So what's my point here, guys? My point is that, debits, credits, like they're just accounting terms.
Right.
Right. It doesn't really have anything to do with the theory behind what's going on here. It's just a way to I don't even know what it's a way to do. It's just, it can be misleading. Right?
Correct.
But
yeah.
Understand the things that we're talking about here, then you're going to get it. And, you won't be in the dark thinking that like, hey, I'm going to sell this option and get paid. Yeah, well, you might get paid and you might not get paid, but you absolutely have an outstanding liability for taking on the requirement of you having to purchase that stock at that strike price.
Right. So the $250 per contract, remember that's multiplier of 100. So it's really $250 per contract. So the calculation is going to go through all three of those. And then let's do a comparison real quick. Take a look at this first one. They all three have what? 100% of the option proceeds. But the first calculation focuses on the underlying market value or the underlying stock. So higher price stocks are probably going to fall under this umbrella. Calculation number 2 focuses on the strike price. So see, you might have a case where, depending on what's happening with the stock or the strikes, where the strikes start getting fairly high. And now this calculation is going to kick in. And then we have this third one that is looking at the number of contracts. So this is the reason that so many people find this very confusing, why I did what I thought was a big transaction, didn't really have a big margin requirement. And then I did one that I thought was fairly small because it was on a little $10 stock, and I got hit with this $20,000 margin requirement.
Yeah.
What's going on? This is why. And so what the broker is going to do is to take the highest of these 3 values, and that becomes your margin requirement. So let's go find out how that's done. And before we do, please remember marketrebellion.com/get started. Lots of great information to help you get a better foundation. So let's use our example from Chalk Talk. Let's look at calculation number 1, 100% of the option proceeds. Remember the question was, we're selling the option for 5. So that's $500. 20% of the underlying market, we said the stock was at 105. We're selling the 100 put. So that's going to be $2,100. But now we also get a little bit of a credit because we're 5 points out of the money. Remember, the stock's at 105. We're selling the 100 put. So they give you this credit of $500. Those two cancel, and we are left with $2,100. So I say, okay, remember that. Let's move on to Calc 2. 100% of the option proceeds, again, $500. But now we're taking 10% of the strike price times our multiplier, 100 shares per contract, times the number of contracts, which is $1,000. Right? So we have a 100 strike, 10% is 100 times 100 shares per contract is 1,000. So now calculation number 2 is $1,500. Calculation number 3 says 100% of the option proceeds, again, $500, and $250 per contract, that's really $250, is $250. So that calculation comes up to be $750. And then what the computer does is it just takes the greatest of the 3. So we came up with $2,100 for Calc 1, $1,500 for Calc 2, and $750 for Calc 3. So the margin requirement is going to be $2,100. But hopefully you see that this could change very quickly. Just by changing a strike or the number of contracts can kick you into a different calculation. So unless you understand these calculations, if you're trying to figure out, well, I just increased the contract by 1, what's happening? You're probably not going to be able to figure it out. You need to do all 3 of these. Lots of interactions going on with them. So again, remember, as Stu mentioned, brokers are allowed to make rules stricter. You might look at this presentation, do exactly this trade, and find out they want $2,300. That's close, but they're still doing some type of a series of calculations behind the scenes. Now, just to show you why it can get so fluky here, we had the stock at 105. The option was trading at 5. Number of contracts is 1. So notice that if we do the 80 strike, we're 25 points out of the money. And look at Calc 1, $100, $1,300, $750. But then we go to the 85 strike, and what happens? We go to $1,350 and then $750. All right, you can see that. And if we look down here at the 100 strike, what happens? Now Calc 1 is the highest. So if we did the 85, yeah, the margin requirement would be $1,350. But if you do the 100 strike, it's $2,100. And again, this is why traders going, I can't figure it out. Why are they just jumped? And that's a pretty big jump. This is why. They are now far more concerned with the value of the stock price. And so that's changing the calculations. So I thought it might also be fun, Stu. Yeah.
Bill, I got a question. Time.
Fire.
I got a question. Can you go back one? So if the stock's 105 and we're talking about the 80 strike price, so that's 25 points away.
Yep.
On a $105 stock, I just hit my calculator. That's 23.8. We'll call it 24%.
Yeah, pretty good hit.
You mean that stock can go down there?
Absolutely, it can.
Well, what about that stock can't go down there? There is no way that stock is going down 25%.
Right. a lot of people say that, and a lot of people find out the hard way,
Yeah.
right?
There's no way that stock is going down 50%. There is no way this $300 stock is going to be
And to
$100.
do you one better, therefore let me sell it 50 times.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm right. That's right. So this put is
It's,
$2.
it's
So
free
let's
money.
see.
Yeah.
That's free money, but 200, right? That's going to get me a bottle of wine. That's not going to get me too much, right?
Not worth it.
I need like
Crank it up.
I need 1,000. So let me sell 5. Oh, you know what? That's not enough. Let me sell 10,
Yep.
and pick up a couple grand. And then I start doing the return and all that and the money. And all of a sudden the stock drops out of bed and you're hosed. Right. And not only are you hosed from the Delta, you're also hosed from the Vega, and you got all kinds of problems. And now you got Mr. Broker calling you up saying, yeah, put up more money.
Margin call.
Or we're going to close you out. And you're like, well, I'll get it to you next week because I'm closing on this house that I just did the deal. No, we need it today.
Close business today.
Tell you, you're going to have to wait for it. So bang, they don't care. They're going to close you out. And
they're
now
shutting you down.
Tremendous loss because you thought it could never happen.
Right.
Now, tell me how that's being a good risk manager.
It's not. And yet we see people do it all the time.
All the time.
So let's take a look at an Excel spreadsheet that I put together to kind of show how these interactions can kind of play out. So here I've got the stock at 105, the option price at 5, one contract. This over here is just allowing us to change where we want to start counting. Okay, so I'm going to start counting from a 50 strike, and I'm going to count by 5s. But for right now, here's the different calculations at different strikes. So I've got them color-coded. In red is Calc 2. Right here in blue is Calc 1. And the green is Calc 3. So notice if you work from the left side of the chart, let's say from the 50 strike, and start moving right, that the green calculation actually is the highest. Right? So for very low strikes, it's the highest. But then what happens? We hit a point where the red becomes the highest for these strikes. And then we hit a point where what happens? Blue becomes the highest. But now, if you look at this red line is on an angle, so you can kind of visualize if it comes out this way, that it's actually going to cross the blue line. So let's say if we come up here to maybe up here. See, now you can see eventually if you go to high enough strikes, now calculation 2 is going to kick in. So it really is just kind of all over the map. Now, where does Calc 3 come in? This is one that catches a lot of traders. Remember, what does it focus on? Number of contracts. The calculation 1 is the value of the shares. Calc 2 is the strike price. So let's knock the stock price down, something low, maybe a $50 stock, $30 stock, some getting the lower prices. Let's make the option price 50 cents, but let's make the number of contracts 50. Okay, now what's going to happen? We need to start our strikes, let's say, and count by 1s. Now look at that. See, now you can see that look at how big that calculation is. It's no joke when you start trying to crank out all of these contracts for the reason that you just talked about. People think, oh, it's so far out of the money, let me sell them a bunch of times. Well, the broker's going to make you ante up for that. But again, we can see this red line doing what? On an angle, if we come out here far enough, what's going to happen? So let's see if we can figure where this might cross. There, it actually crossed too much. But you can actually see... oh, I'm sorry, I was counting by 5. Let's come back to 50. All right, so you can see that eventually that the red line or calculation 2 will come into play. So I know it gets very weird and it gets very hard to follow. So part of the point of this presentation is if you're out there selling naked options, not that we recommend doing it, especially if you're new, you need somebody who understands what they're doing or for the right situations. But if you are one of these who likes to sell naked puts, especially because you think it's free money, this can help you to understand where these requirements are coming from and why they might see like, man, the broker just doesn't trust me. Last time he charged me $3,500, now he's charging me $31,000. Something's wrong. Nope, it's because you've got a boatload of contracts on a low price stock.
And here's something else to kind of think about. So there's one of these three calculations will take place and you'll have X amount of margin requirement, say it's 10,000. But if you were on the cash secured side of things, it might be 30,000, right? Maybe you sold the 30 strike, or the 300 strike. But I guess what would that be? The 30 times 100, 3,000, right? If it was 300, it'd be 30,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are vastly different numbers. So,
oh yeah,
how do you get from one to the other? As you can, figure out here, going from one calculation, going from the cash secured to the other one, that's a higher tier. That's a higher tier of being able to do things.
Yep.
All the brokers have these different levels. Some have 1 through 5, 1 through 4, 1 through 3, whatever your broker is, your broker is. But initially they're going to put you on initially they're not going to let you do any of the shorts, right? And then next they'll let you do spreads, and next they'll let you do cash security, and eventually they'll put you on something like this, and maybe even put you on portfolio margin at some point. Talk to your broker, ask, how can I get on this? How can I get to the next level? This is what we're, it's not really part of what we're talking about here, but this is where these numbers are coming from. It's for the broker's benefit. It's really for your benefit as well. All right. Nobody wants to see you go down the toilet and lose all the money. So it's really there to help you out as well. The idea being, look, you want to do something, go for it. It's your risk, but you got to be able to handle your risk. We're not in the business of handling your risk. You have to handle your risk. So that's why they make you put up the money.
Yeah, got to cough up the money. But we hope that would at least solve some of the mystery, because we get that question a lot. People saying, how come the broker requirements used to be this and now there's so much more? Is it because the market's down today? Well, no, it's probably because your trade is greatly different. You're going for a bunch of contracts, or before it was out of the money, now it's not. Now it's at the money. You're not getting that credit for being out of the money. There are a lot of reasons, but you can see that they will cross. So again, you can see here that the green calculation dominates until you hit around 65 strike. Then the red number dominates. That's calculation 2. So it just depends on the numbers that you put in. So hopefully that helps you to solve the mystery. And again, you don't need to do these on your own. Just we wanted to have you a little bit of a better understanding of where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's all.
Yep. So let's take a look at our Chalk Talk. Stock is 105. You sold $100 put for 5. What is the margin requirement? And if you paid attention to that, you would see it is $2,100. But now you understand why it's there. And as Stu, as you brought up that the odds may be low, but they're never zero. Some of our favorite little memes that we like to show up in Q&A. Just love this one. Odds of being attacked by a cat with a tank are low, but never zero. And then this one is my favorite. The odds of being murdered in your own home by a psychopathic waterfowl are low, but never zero. So just as a word of caution for anybody who's out there selling naked puts way, way, way out of the money.
Or calls,
you need to understand normalized Vega. You need to understand that they are not free money. And there are better ways to do it, at least relatively speaking, by using some spreads. And so those are some of the things we like to talk about here at Market Rebellion. If you're not part of the Rebel family here, we'd love to have you join us. And you can check us out, marketrebellion.com, or support@marketrebellion.com, and maybe hop into our Q&As and learn there as well. But Stu, any final closing comments?
So I like to say something in my coaching sessions with people. There's never really a never, and there's never really an always. So never say never and never say always. And when you hear yourself say that can never happen,
hit the brakes.
Hit the brakes and realize that Bill and Stu said you're wrong, and believe us, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I
like that.
Wrong. Just hit
I tell traders, I say never say always, and always say never say never. So it's just the same idea of saying, don't say it can't happen. And no matter how confident you are in the stock, it might not be the stock's fault. Think about what happened on 911. Some of the most technically sound or fundamentally sound companies all tanked. Everything did. Yes, it can happen. But hopefully that gives you a little bit more of the method to the madness of why the margin requirements for the naked puts can seem kind of so flaky. And we hope that answers those questions for you. Please join us next Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern for our next session of Coach's Corner, and we'll see you then.